Okay, welcome everyone. This is Gaurav Kapoor from Newristics, and thanks for joining the Behavior Masterclass for April. If there are people who are joining us for the first time, just a very quick background on what behavior is. It's a monthly masterclass that's only 30 minutes, designed to educate pharmaceutical market researchers and marketers on the field of behavioral science and give them very practical insights or guidance on how to use this science on the brands or in the disease states that they're working in. So this session will be 30 minutes, and we will dive right in. Behavioral science. If there are people here who are joining us for the first time, just very quickly, it's a vast field of research in understanding how human beings make decisions using mental shortcuts, heuristics, biases, and other decision-making processes. And it has major applications on in the life sciences industry in better customers, physicians, patients, payers, and how they and also improving your marketing efforts to influence their decisions. So it's a science that actually helps you understand and influence. There's a lot of literature and reading material available on this science, but one of the things we often hear from people is it's somewhat difficult or challenging to figure out how to exactly apply it. So making it more tangible, more actionable is the goal of Behavior Masterclass. How can we literally in 30 minutes at the end of this masterclass, at the end of any masterclass, to teach you two concepts, two heuristics you could apply almost immediately after the class is over. So that's the bar, or that's the standard that we try to achieve in every class. So which makes the science much more actionable at a day-to-day level for you. So how is each class organized? We are going to take two heuristics. If you are new to the concept of heuristics, then you could separately approach us or watch some of our previous master classes that have been archived, or just do a little bit of Googling and you will catch up on that. But heuristics are mental shortcuts that for all of us. But where it becomes interesting is that many times these shortcuts can also lead to bad or irrational decisions without us realizing it. We heuristics, every masterclass we pick up two heuristics and help you understand what those are, help you understand how they might be influencing physician or patient decisions in we look at a lot of examples. The best way to understand and apply this science is to learn from examples, and we bring highly kind of tailored, customized, or curated examples that you can recognize and relate to immediately, and kind of help you understand how that heuristic is a good example for a given heuristic. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can start using it, what's the kind of strategy or tactics on how to apply this to your work or marketing work. So the first heuristic that we'll cover today is called Numerosity Effect. And some of these heuristics could have a little clumsy or complicated names. It's only because they came out of academia, and sometimes they were named by academicians, if you will. So, but the ideas we are going to make an attempt to simplify the idea so that it's very, very easy to understand and implement. So let's dive right in. What is Numerosity Effect? Numerosity Effect is bigger is better type of, everybody knows that term or phrase from life. The idea of bigger is better when you apply it to numbers becomes numerosity effect. So there are certain times in life when the mental using to make decisions, it could be decisions related to diagnosis or treatment, market access, or any kind of pharmaceutical or life sciences related decisions that customers are making. The rule of thumb is if they see a big number or a bigger number, that basically the simple rule of thumb they're applying is that must be better. And where it becomes irrational is a couple of ways. Number one, there are sometimes when bigger numbers don't pay as much attention to what does that number what is that number relating to, or what does it apply to, or what is the context behind that number. And sometimes you totally just pay no attention to the context. And an example of this kind of infographic is a very good way to bring this idea to life. So there's lots of big numbers on here, some bigger than others, but the whole infographic is designed in a way to bring your attention in a very creatively, appealing manner to and draw your attention to big number. But let's look at some of these big numbers. Up towards the kind of top right, second from the top, 58,632 most smiles given to a single account. What does that mean? It's like the idea, but nobody's reading what comes after 58,632 very carefully. 9 smiles Enrique Iglesias received for his first response. So this is a good example of the bigness of the number is catching your attention. You're really not even paying attention after what comes after that number, or what comes before that number, or what does that number really apply to. That is numerosity effect. So now we're going to look at examples. We'll look at examples in marketing in different categories, and see if we can also find examples in the pharmaceutical industry as well. Summer is coming, and most of you will be out there in the sun, and you will make sure that your children are adequately covered with sunscreen. Very interesting dynamic that happens in the sunscreen category. That it's a simple way of how consumers basically make purchase decisions. For many people, the simple rule of thumb they are using when you're deciding what to buy is, the higher the SPF score is, the stronger or more protective the sunscreen got to be. And the price kind of goes up also, and they use all sorts of fancy words like helioplex, broad spectrum, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, it gives you the sense of, it must be the higher SPF must mean that I am protective from skin cancer. Melanoma is the single most prevalent cancer. And it has been hammered into our heads that, we have to protect from sun exposure, because otherwise we might have skin cancer or serious skin conditions. Let's look at some facts. SPF 50 already blocks 98% of UVB rays. SPF 110 is only adding potentially 1% or 1.5%, et cetera. And who knows what the adverse events or effects of side effects or AEs are of going higher up in the SPF. They don't really make that very easy to understand. Now there's a lot of talk about how Florida, Hawaii, et cetera, they are banning a lot of conventional sunscreens, but they're doing it more because of the ocean and the reef damage, and less about the damage to the human skin. UVB is the main cause of sunburn, but UVA is actually the primary cause of skin cancer. So in our own way of making the purchase decision or using this SPF score, most of us actually connect the higher SPF score to better protection from skin cancer, when that's not what that SPF score is applying to at all. So, and most people don't know that. They don't think about that. They haven't done research on that. And if it was brought to their attention, they will most of them would be surprised to say, really, I didn't know that. That means that then what is it applying to? Like, what is it protecting me from if it's not protecting me from the risk of cancer? So this is an example of, and at this point in time, this is a bad category from a profitability, from a category dynamic standpoint. This category is not a desirable category to be in for many manufacturers. So much so that Bayer, so basically spun off or sold off their Coppertone business or is trying to sell it off. And there's just a lot of issues associated with, the seasonality of the category. But this simple SPF score is literally what's kind of, become almost the most dominant driver of purchase decision making, and one could be rational in how it's being used. Let's take another one. This is another category that many of you might be participating in. You might be using probiotics. If you have been exposed to this category for a decade and have done work in it, 10 years ago, this category was not driven the same way it's driven now. The CFU count, the number of bacteria in a given capsule or in a given, that was not the dominant driver of decision making. It was an attribute, but it was nowhere near as influential. Today, it's almost the only thing you kind of sort of look for. And the simple rule of thumb, again, you're using is how many bacteria are in a capsule, how many different strains of bacteria are in a capsule, how many sources of bacteria, plant or this or that, are in a capsule. So it's all, the numbers are very different. 12 strains versus 100 billion CFU count are kind of, they're very different types of numbers, but numerosity effect applies at different levels. It's the same idea. And again, if you were to do research in this category and think rationally about how many bacteria do you really need and to actually have healthy flora, both in your gut as well as on your skin and other organs, and how bacteria actually multiply under the right conditions, bacteria will multiply very fast and colonize, and you don't really need to pay a bottle of 100 billion, this specific product, I don't know the exact price, but I'm pretty sure it's over $50. And if there's 30 capsules in it. So people are paying a very significant premium for this numerosity effect. Perhaps even doing it irrationally. They may not be recognizing, or they haven't looked under the surface to say what are the facts and whether numerosity effect should be used in this category the way they're using it or not. Let's look at another example. Here's another example that almost all households, like people who are on this call, they may have this product or they're familiar with this product. And in the world of marketing, where brands kind of try to come up with claims and then they change their claim and then they come up with another claim, etc., this brand Lysol has had this claim forever, right? For a long, long time. It's so much so that it's literally synonymous with their brand. Kills 99.9% of viruses and bacteria. And then there's two asterisks next to it, for which you have to actually go dig and search and see what are those asterisks applying to. But if you were to Google, just do a little bit of research on how many viruses and bacteria are possibly out there in the world. It's estimated that it could be in millions. And we know about a few of them. Lysol has studied or works on even fewer of them, the ones that are listed here in Salmonella. And now we're not saying those are not important. Of course they're important. They are, they make people sick. They can even lead to, severe illness or hospitalizations in children, etc. So nobody is trivializing the importance of protecting against these viruses or bacteria, but the claim makes you believe that it protects against all viruses and bacteria, and the 99.9% numerosity effect really helps them kind of, people don't even think about the implications of what that claim means. They just they're believing it very, very readily and not realizing that what that number applies to could be a very small subset of viruses and bacteria, not all of them, not even close to being all of them. They might be paying a premium for this, Or people who have moved on from the likes of Lysol to more natural and organic type of surface cleaners might be saying, you know, like, do you realize that if it's that toxic or whatever is in it that can kill so many viruses and bacteria, could it kill you too? So, you know, that logic can also apply. So there are many ways people might be behaving irrationally in using, or in kind of using numerosity effect for a product category like this. Let's look at one more example. This one is in the pharmaceutical industry. So here's a very simple message on the screen. Days of 100% total abstinence were 10x higher for product P versus placebo. In parentheses, 7.2 versus 0.7 days per month. This message tested very well in research. Yet, if you were to actually read that message carefully and pay attention, if the physician was to do that, it would have tested dead last. So we're going to try something slightly different today. Is there anybody listening to this masterclass who can point out what is wrong with this message? Why should it have not tested well? Why it should have fallen to the bottom? And the answer on why it tested well is provided. It's because of numerosity effect. But why it should not have? Anybody who who can take a guess or who already knows the answer? No? Okay, I'll lead the way. When this message was written, there was a mistake made. The 7.2 versus 0.7 days per month actually applies to the days of drinking. This is alcohol related, of drinking, not the days of abstinence. So in a month, if you are abstaining only for 7 days, that means you're drinking for 23 days. That's not a very good product. That is not something that the physician should actually be impressed by, because that's not protecting my patients. AA can do it better than that, and you know, that their ears should have perked to say there's something not right here. Or if that's what the data says, then I don't care whether it's 10x or not. It's like both of them are bad numbers, so I'm not using this product. This is a good example of how numerosity effect can literally make people not pay attention to what the numbers are applying to. It's so, like, when you read the 100% total abstinence and the 10x higher, you don't pay attention to the rest. Now the 7.2 and 0.7 is 10x, so it you know, the numbers checked out. There's nothing wrong with it, but if you were paying attention to that, can't be a good metric for abstinence. If that is what we're focusing on, you would have either recognized either there's an error or this cannot be a good product. So, and this happened in research. So this is numerosity effect is a interesting heuristic that we're going to talk about how to. This is the first heuristic of the day, and now we're going to move on to the next heuristic. The second heuristic is one if you are familiar with behavioral science or you have been using it, etc., you might have utilized this already. Ambiguity Aversion is the name of the heuristic. This heuristic pretty much is what the name says it is, which means are averse to ambiguities. Now, what does that mean? It means that when in life, when you have choices in front of you, when you have to make a decision on a given topic or something, you know, whatever in life you're trying to make a decision, you will shy away from choices in which there is something unknown. And it doesn't, you know, it's something that you're not that, you know, familiar with, or you're not sure about it, or it's like there's some uncertainty in your mind. Even though if you had actually taken the time to figure out what that unknown is, you might have realized that it was a better choice for you. So if you're evaluating two choices, A or B, and B has something, some unknown in it, you are more likely to go for A, not B, even though rationally B was a better choice. Because we're just averse to unknowns and uncertainties, because that's how we've been conditioned over time. We've been burnt by times when we were kind of more willing to believe, and then whatever the unknown was, it came back and bit us. And so now we're overly cautious and we don't want to fall in that trap again. So we're going to look at examples again. Ambiguity aversion plays a big role in many disease states, and it's an important heuristic that is, it's important to internalize the gravity of this heuristic in how it drives human decision making. Let's take an example that everyone should be able to relate to. And this is an example that creates a big problem for the restaurant or food service industry. When one of the challenges for that industry is basically menu innovation. They're constantly trying to figure out, how do we come up with new exciting items on our menu that will drive traffic into the restaurant, that will increase the total pay, like the total ring, like kind of upsell you towards a higher priced item, etc. And consumers also want exciting, different flavors. They'll tell you that if you do market research in the restaurant industry, you will actually find, that would be high up as a driver of why do you go to a certain place, because they have interesting items, and different flavors. So here's an example of, you go out and you're going to a restaurant where you have been, and you might even have a favorite item that you like on their menu or two. And then you see another item or two on their menu that is new. And now you're like, okay, and we've highlighted some of them. It's like, a pork loin. I like pork loin. But what is Duroc? I don't know. And now you can ask the waiter, but now you might be feeling a little shy or embarrassed, or maybe you don't want to come across as somebody who's not very knowledgeable. And maybe you're expected to know what Duroc is. So you may not want to, you may reject that item, even though you are attracted to it, even though you might have actually loved it. And you say, okay, let's look at short ribs. Oh, I love short ribs, but toasted farro risotto, I know what risotto is, but what the heck is farro? I have no idea. I'm not touching that. So that's an example of how many times, like human behavior in how you choose to order items in a restaurant, you will, and it's a vicious cycle. So what do you end up doing with a situation like this? You order your standard, free-range chicken, which is what you had in the same restaurant for 20 times already, and you're sick and tired of it, but then you order it anyways and you walk away, and then it wasn't as good an experience as you were hoping to have. So even by your own standards, you might be acting irrationally, all because of ambiguity aversion. Let's look at some other examples here. We're going to play a commercial here. This is related to healthcare, but not in the pharmaceutical industry. For companies, this one is for Humana, but you could use any large insurer who is offering Medicare Advantage plans. So, and this is a very big challenge for all the insurers, in that in the Medicare Advantage category is extremely kind of confusing and complicated for seniors. When they become eligible, if they just go on the government provided Medicare plan and don't look into supplements and or add any kind of additional supplement to their plan, then it becomes extremely difficult to get them to switch from the government provided plan to a Medicare Advantage plan. And they might in fact be quite irrationally, or end up the supplement plans to their government provided Medicare plan, or one by one patchwork, and dealing with multiple insurance companies and the government CMS, and still not actually getting all the benefits, the coverage that they ideally would like, and probably paying way more, or at least more than what they could be or should be paying. If they had simply switched from that way of kind of covering themselves, which is a government plan plus supplemental benefits, to a Medicare Advantage plan, most of them would have saved money, would have gotten better coverage, but it's an extremely difficult behavior switch to drive, and most companies have not been able to convert people to do that. So let's play a small clip of a Humana commercial that'll kind of bring it has what the conversation that's happening in the commercial brings the ambiguity aversion heuristic to life.
At Humana, we know you're unique, so you have different needs from other John Smiths.
Yeah, I've always thought so.
And together, we can find a plan that's right for you.
Great. I go to the doctor a couple of times a year, and I have some prescriptions, but I'm never fully sure of what's covered and what's not.
With Humana's all-in-one Medicare Advantage plans, you get coverage for hospital stays, doctor visits, and Part D prescription drug benefits, all for an affordable and sometimes no monthly plan premium.
So as you can see here, it's very directly setting up the idea that I can never tell, or I never know what's covered, what's not covered. It's very difficult to compare plans, and like I can never kind of be sure. And this is the crux of the lack of switching from the government to the Medicare Advantage plan. And this is a challenge that Humana and others are trying to address. Let's look at
At Humana, we know you're unique.
The next is also commercial. This is from the financial services industry, and it's around like the product category that this commercial is focusing on is reverse mortgages, reverse home mortgages, which is something that also has a lot of uncertainty and confusion surrounding around it. So let's watch this commercial.
Just like you, I thought that reverse mortgages had to have some kind of catch, just a way for the banks to get your house, right? Well, then I did some homework, and I found out it's not any of that. It's not another way for the bank to get your house, and it's also not too good to be true. A reverse mortgage loan is a simple idea, really. You turn your home's equity into cash, and you pay it back when you leave the house.
So lots and lots of people probably have heard about reverse mortgages, but they don't know what it is. And if they have tried to research on their own, they have not gotten a clear answer. So they might be irrationally sitting on their currently inefficient mortgage structure and paying too much interest or paying too much capital, or maybe at the risk of, if they have been in financial crisis, maybe at the risk of losing their house to the bank, many different, or maybe not feeling so comfortable or confident about their financial, security as they are now retired and whatnot. So this is this again in this case, both Humana and AAG are fighting ambiguity aversion. It's something that is making it very difficult for them to get the consumer or the customer's attention and get them to, kind of look into the category itself. This is like even before you get people interested in your product or your brand, they're not even actually, in the lobby of the hotel, forget, getting to their room in the hotel type of idea. So this is, there are many categories where this dynamic kind of exists and has to be addressed. So let's do a very quick recap of what we've learned. Numerosity effect, it's basically about when you are mostly focused on the big numbers and you are not paying attention to what that number applies to. And ambiguity aversion is about the devil you know is better than the devil you don't type of idea, and you're averse to unknowns and uncertainties, and because of that, you can even make irrational decisions. So some very quick kind of guidance for you on how to use these heuristics in and around the disease states that you are working in for your brand. Numerosity effect. Focus on clinical endpoints or data, any kind of data that you're trying to communicate Focus on the data that supports big numbers. There are many situations where we have seen that a secondary, tertiary endpoint is significantly more appealing to the physician because the numerosity effect can be applied or applies to that endpoint when you're communicating the results of that endpoint. And physicians find that much more appealing than perhaps even your primary endpoint, because numerosity effect doesn't apply to the way that endpoint is structured. So, you know, either all, if you're working on in NPP, new products planning, very early stage, design your clinical studies and construct your TPP and your clinical endpoints using numerosity effect to your advantage. Feed it like crazy. Also, if you're in market and you are now looking to use big number infographics like the one we showed you earlier in your visit or other marketing materials to catch attention of whether it's HCPs or patients, it could be anyone, but you want to feed numerosity effect to your advantage. Ambiguity aversion, also, if you are launching a new drug, this is an exercise you do lots of strategic planning when you're launching a new drug. You think about, you know, you do wargaming, et cetera, et cetera. Dedicate one of your kind of group team discussions or brainstorming sessions to mapping out if it has to be done in excruciating detail, so be it, map out the perceived unknowns that the physician or the patient is going to have in their mind if they were to adopt your product, what are the unknowns that they are averse to? They could be related to MOA, they could be related to efficacy, they could be related to AEs, they could be related to cost, they could be related to process, they could be related to so many things. Like, just break it down and just kind of, you know, very surgically map all the unknowns and then consider them or treat them as barriers that you have to one by one attack. So that, you know, and that's how you can maximize the adoption of your product. And also, if you are in a disease state, many times you are, where there are certain entrenched behaviors that physicians have been doing, whether it could be at a brand level or it could be even just at a disease state level, those behaviors have now created the knowns that you are competing with, right? So that's the devil they know. And now you are basically, you know, you have entered the category, or you are in the category with somewhat of an unknown, challenging those entrenched behaviors. So try to understand or map those entrenched behaviors in your research. Those are the knowns that you are up against. And again, using messaging or using any of the marketing levers that you are planning to use, try to address those knowns and either cast doubt around them, or to basically counter them with saying the product you have is also equally knowable and even better. So, you know, that depends on the strategy that you're going to use. So that's where we will stop for today's session. As a recap, we covered numerosity effect,